Many thanks for choosing us this afternoon. The Supreme Court has unanimously dismissed a petition by journalist and lawyer Richard Delasky against the controversial Human Sexual Rights and Family Values Bill led by Justice Lovelace Averill Johnson. The court ruled that the bill, which seeks to criminalize LGBTQI-related activities, is not yet law and cannot be reviewed. Mrs. Sky and Amanda Odoe argued procedural flaws in Parliament rendered the bill unconstitutional, but the court upheld the legislative process, emphasizing that only enacted laws can be subject to review.
This is a private member's bill. The Constitution specifies the way in which private members' bills should be brought. We do not believe that it was done in that way. So when the Supreme Court says that, this was like a precipitate action, with respect, we respect his decision, but we disagree because it says Parliament shall not proceed. So at what point shall Parliament not proceed? Clearly, it cannot be after they passed an act. It is when they are considering it that they cannot proceed until they have done A, B, C, D. And we did not have the evidence that those procedural steps had been undertaken.
You are a human rights activist. What do you feel, what image do you think this will paint for the country, looking at this latest?
Oh, well, we still have a rule of a country which is governed by the rule of law. We went to court. The court has given its decision. They're separate arms of government. The different arms can rule differently. We can also exhaust our different remedies, but we have not seen the full judgment of the courts. It says it will be ready on Friday, so we are waiting to see what the full judgment is, and then we will determine what remedies, what steps are available to us.
Okay. We've also seen countries influencing one another across the continent with regard to this legislation. What does this send to the rest of the continent?
Well, I mean, Uganda passed a bill like this. In the first time that it passed the act was challenged. The Constitutional Court ruled against the act. It went back again. This time, they were not challenging the procedural issues. They were challenging the content of the act. Largely, the court let it stand, although it said that some of the provisions were not right. So I hope that our courts learn from each other. They take steps from each other. But we still, as a human rights defender and as somebody who believes in constitutionalism, I take what the Constitution says seriously about protecting the rights of all Ghanaians, about not discriminating against any Ghanaians, So, but mind you, this action was not about the substantive provisions. It was procedural, yes. So we preserve our rights. When we came to court last year for an injunction, one of the things that was being urged on us by the Chief Justice was, why don't you wait? We have invalidated acts, so wait, let the act be passed. But we thought, still, because the Constitution allows us to bring an action, even at that stage, that we would do that. Now that the Supreme Court says there is nothing wrong with that, it should proceed, we still have options under the Act,
Okay. But how hopeful are you? Because there are people who have suggested that, this is a country where 93% of the population have already made it clear that they don't want to have LGBTQ people as their neighbors.
So what are they going to...
Don't you reckon this is a fruitless course?
No, I don't reckon that it is a fruitless course. What you are telling us is that we must legislate intolerance into law. That is a dangerous way to go, because the next time they might say that they don't want burly men like you, and because a majoritarian rule or a democracy does not mean just the wishes of the majority. Have you seen footage of them being banished from traditional areas, of being dragged to chiefs' palaces, and of sheep and other things being cut and poured on their heads? When you banish somebody, when you say that you can no longer live here, that is not an attack. When people extort money from people, when they threaten that they will reveal your identity, that is not attack. What do you understand by attack? I think that there have been enough documented cases of attacks, even without a law in effect. And this is going to embolden all kinds of people, including criminals and hooligans, from taking the law into their own hands. If LGBT people offend the law, deal with them. But to single out a group of people because you don't like their sexual or gender identity, that is what I find abhorrent.
So what are the next steps for you and the entire...
We will
Assuming
wait.
the president assents to the bill, what will be your next line of action?
Yeah, so we will wait for the judgment on Friday, as the court has promised. We will wait to see what the president will do. We will advise ourselves. We are not going to stop defending people because there is a law which says we cannot do that.
Are you paying a price for what you're doing? Because
Personally, no. I don't think that my reputation has suffered. I do not believe that my family thinks any the less of me, that my friends think any the less of me. No.
I'm speaking in terms of probably attacks or threats to your
security concerns.
Oh, I'm fine. Some people have made threats, but I'm not afraid. I think that as a prudent person, I should know where I would not be welcome, you know. But I actually think that many of such people are fearful people to even bring up such things.
Okay.
Meanwhile, NDC MPs have welcomed the decision of the Supreme Court to dismiss actions filed against the anti-LGBTQ bill. Member of Parliament for Medina, Francis Xavier Susu, argues that the Supreme Court has finally done the right thing. He also says the ball is now in the court of President Akufo-Addo to either sign the bill into law or give reason why he cannot.
I think that the court just upheld the position of the law because Parliament is a legislative arm of government. The work of Parliament ends with a presidential assent. If the President does not assent, there are provisions in the Constitution that shows what the President is supposed to do. You know, convey in a memorandum to Parliament the reason for refusal to assent, for Parliament to then take further steps, whether to amend provisions of the law and so on and so forth. But I think the action filed by my brother Richard Sky was quite premature. And I think what the Supreme Court did today, with all due respect to our brother Sky and his lawyers, is only just upholding the rule of law and also upholding the separation of powers.
Well, we have Sam George on the line, and we know that he's been championing this cause for a while now. Thank you for joining us. If you can hear me, Honorable Sam George. I know that earlier this year, you mentioned that the court has been delaying with this, but how are you welcoming the decision by the court?
Good afternoon to your viewers. I believe that where we sit, it's 10 months late. Justice delayed is justice denied. As the maxim goes, we have seen the judgment. I believe that it's the right thing that has been done, rather late. This should have happened. It should not have taken us 10 months to get here. It should have taken the Supreme Court 10 months to pronounce this judgment. But we'll like to say better late than never, so we move.
And so will this bill then die with the current parliament, or you intend to resume it at the next parliament? Likely you've been
There's no reason for this bill to die before the current parliament. I mean, bills that have been passed by parliament don't die. Let's use this to do a bit of public education. When a bill is before parliament and has not gone through the 3 stages of reading, and that parliament comes to an end, then the bill is set to die with that parliament. The Family Values Bill is currently not before parliament. It has gone through the first stage, it's gone through the second stage, it's gone through the third stage, and has been passed by Parliament. Once a bill is passed by Parliament, it no longer sits with that Parliament.
Right.
It ought to be transmitted to the President. And so, if you read Article 1066, it says that when a bill is passed, you would send the explanatory memorandum of the bill and the debate together to the President. and then the president will then assent to it within 7 days. Or if he chooses not to, he would state the grounds for which he is not and send a memorandum. That's Article 106(7) and 8 of the Constitution. So this bill is not dying. But, I mean, like I said, Article 106(7) says it would signify within 7 days. The Speaker had asked the clerk to send the bill back to the presidency about 4 weeks ago. I don't know if the clerk has complied, but if the clerk did not comply, we would expect that he will comply today or this week. And once it goes, the president has still got almost 3 weeks in office.
Yeah. Right.
The thing says 7 days. It's
right.
enough time for him to sign it.
We recall that the president mentioned that the main reason why he's unable to assent to it was because there was a dispute on this bill in court. Now that there's clarity, are you hoping that the president will assent to it to make it a law? And if he doesn't, what will the incoming government do? Will the president assent to this bill?
Unfortunately, I don't speak for the president, and so I'm unable to say what his next line of action will be. The impediment, he said, was in his way, has been taken out. Like all Ghanaians and majority of Ghanaians, I hope that he will do what is right by himself, by Ghanaians, and by God. I just hope he does what's right. But I can't speak as to whether he will or he will not. I think that we should give him room to react to it.
Well, let's come as a surprise if the current president doesn't assent to it.
It will be disappointing.
All right. Many thanks for talking to us, Honorable Sam George. And congratulations for retaining your seat as well.
Much as well, Rafa.
Well, so meanwhile, President Akufo-Addo has received a petition seeking the removal of Chief Justice Gertrude Torkornoo from office over allegations of misconduct and incompetence. The petition accuses Justice Torkornoo of constitutional and administrative breaches. The petitioner argues that these alleged actions undermine the credibility and integrity of the judiciary. Now, on your screen now are excerpts of the petition that the petitioner sent to the president. Now, first off, says that Professor Stephen Kukwasari, you know him as Azar, a citizen of the Republic of Ghana, respectfully submits this petition to Your Excellency, the President of the Republic of Ghana, seeking the removal of Her Ladyship Gertrude Torkornoo, the Chief Justice of the Republic of Ghana, on grounds of 1, stated misbehavior and incompetence. It also moves on to say that the legal basis of my petition is Article 146, and it quotes Clause 1 of the 1992 Constitution of the Republic of Ghana, that for the avoidance of doubt, my petition focuses on stated misbehavior and incompetence related to the Chief Justice's administrative functions as head of the judiciary responsible for its supervision and administration under Article 125, Clause 4 of the Constitution. Now, my petition does not arise from the Chief Justice's exercise of her judicial functions. Accordingly, he goes on to explain that the petition does not challenge any decisions, orders, or directives issued by the Chief Justice in the performance of her duty as a Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, including those made to enforce judgments, decrees, or orders in cases she has adjudicated. I fully understand, respect, and value the importance of decisional independence. It is my understanding that upon the receipt of this petition, Your Excellency shall, acting in consultation with the Council of State, appoint a committee consisting of 2 justices of the Supreme Court, one of whom you shall appoint as chairman, and 3 other persons who are not members of the Council of State, nor members of Parliament, nor lawyers. You can see this at Article 146, Clause 6 of the Constitution as well. It is my further understanding that the committee shall inquire into the petition and recommend to you whether the Chief Justice ought to be removed from office on the grounds maintained in this petition. I affirm my understanding that all proceedings hearings shall be held in camera, and the Chief Justice is entitled to be heard in her defense by herself or by a lawyer or other except of her choice. It's therefore my understanding that Your Excellency, the President of the Republic of Ghana, shall act in accordance with the recommendations of the committee, and also refers them to see Article 146 and provides the clause 6 to 9 in the Constitution for the President to reference as well. I therefore petition the President to initiate proceedings to remove the Chief Justice from office to uphold the Constitution, maintain the integrity of the judiciary, and restore public confidence in our judicial system. Well, following this, anti-corruption campaigners are urging the committee established by President-elect John Mahama to carefully handle information gathered from the public on suspected corruption cases to avoid perceptions of witch hunting. Earlier today, a spokesperson for the President-elect announced a 5-member team tasked with leading the Operation Recover or Loot agenda. The team is headed by Samuel Okujeto-Ablakwa, Member of Parliament for North Tongue, and in an interview on desk earlier today, Edem Senano, a member of the African Union Anti-Corruption Board, and Vitus Azim, an anti-graft advocate, called on the committee to protect the identities of whistleblowers. This, they noted, is crucial to encouraging Ghanaians to come forward with vital information.
It will be effective because this is a whistleblowing approach. It's something we use as a standard. It's good practice across the world that you have whistleblowing people who have information, and typically what will happen is that we may have 2-3 people giving information that then makes something that may be purely speculative more objective, because you had different people give you different, which can be cross-checked. So whistleblowing is an own way of gathering information, and when be validated, it then becomes a good source for investigation and prosecution. So it can be effective to the extent that you are able to encourage people to give information, and they feel that their identities will be protected, they will not be exposed or put themselves at risk by engaging in trying to support the process.
You're watching The Pulse on the Joy News channel. We'll go for a quick break. We'll be back shortly. Back to The Pulse. Now, for far too long, Ghana's educational sector has been wielded as a political tool. Decisions that shape the future of our youth are made for political gains and not progress. Critical reforms have been sidelined, and key stakeholders have been left out of the conversation. Well, indeed, prior to the 2024 elections, the two major political parties once again outlined their visions. The NDC, having emerged victorious, signals of strong commitment to educational reforms. But the question remains, what specific reforms are needed? This afternoon on The Pulse, we tackle the issues head-on. Where in the educational sector or system should these reforms occur? Why are these reforms essential now? And who should lead these discussions? We've assembled some of the finest minds to help us understand the sector very well. But before that, my favorite man, Kofi Ejay, has all the data and will put it to perspective. And he's here. Kofi, what have we been finding?
Well, first of all, we need to quantify what you call political promise. I mean, what is both the MPP and NDC, what are they saying in terms of the education sector? Going into this year's election, we are looking at the promises they made. And just like I always say, now the blue part is immaterial. We will not be going to the blue part that made 54 promises on education.
But that was wide.
That was
NPP
very,
54.
very wide, more than half, twice. I mean,
I like to think because of their flagship program, the free SHS, it seemed to have, cut across a bigger chunk of their problem.
Absolutely.
And so the NDC had to face them head on.
Yeah, the truth is that always and all the time, the opposition party makes a lot of promises when they want to come to power.
Okay.
And for the NDC, on the education sector, they made about 125, at least 125 strong promises that they want to actually make when they come to power in 2024, 2025 and beyond. Let's go into some of the problems that have bedeviled this education sector that we are talking about. First, we need to start with the early education. What are some of the problems? And you can see it on the smart wall. 10% of KG age children not in school. That is a staggering number. always we have problems with inequality, TLSs and teachers, and also the pedagogy and other infrastructure problems that we have. In terms of these problems, we'll be going deep into that. But for me, this figure is really, really staggering. 30% dropout in terms of the basic education that we're talking about. I mean, the education starts from the early stage, basic education. For you to have about 30% of your basic, education, where you have about 30% dropout, that for me is very, very huge. And we'll see what the NDC want to do about that. Now I'm taking you through the problems. We have 1 million, children who are out of school currently. We are still talking about the basic education. That's also one big problem that we should be talking about in this, deliberation. And I'm also talking about only 15% of public basic schools having access to ICT facilities. I mean, it means that if you sample about 100, basic schools in Ghana, roughly about just, 20 out of that have ICT schools. That number is very, very low. Other countries are doing way higher than the 15% that we are currently doing. Also, 1 million desk, deficit. Definitely, you go to some certain schools and they do not have desks. We still have schools under trees, and there's still a big problem in Mfa.
But Kofi, so 1 million students dropped out of school. I'd have thought that it will make up for the 1 million deficits, because the test that they were sitting on.
Exactly. It tells you that if we have everybody going to school, definitely
it'll be a double.
It could be a double. I mean, we could see this number going up significantly in terms of the deficit. Definitely, there's also the low level of the learning accountabilities that we always see in the basic school as well. Now, let's go to the secondary school. And at this moment, it's the secondary school that has become the challenge. Why? Because of the flagship program called the Free SHS program, where government is spending on average about 2.5 billion Ghana cedis just on the secondary education alone. And why is it becoming a problem? Because of this, four factors that you see on the smart wall. The first one having to do with waxing more practice. Every year we see this going up. Somebody has done this, somebody has done that. I mean, we always talk about it, but we never seem to have a solution to that. Another one is the Free SHS, which is a double track system. Extensively, we've spoken about it in the last 8 years. What is the NDC administration going to do about the double track system? It's all about, the numbers you have and the infrastructure available. That has always been the problem. Feeding school and the school placement is also one big challenge that faces the secondary aspect, and then also curriculum and LRS. I always struggle to pronounce the teaching and learning materials.
Yes.
It's also one big challenge of the secondary, both secondary and primary. Very, very, big problems there. Now, for me, let's focus on tertiary, because John Dramani Mahama makes certain sweet promises on tertiary education. One of them is the fact that he says he's going to make first year, level 100 free, right?
Yeah.
Let's look at what they're going to do. But it's also one of the problems that faces the tertiary education has to do with financial barriers. Now, if you look into the budget and you see how much even the big schools like Legon and KNUST are all generating every year, they're supposed to retain everything to take care of almost everything. But you look at it and how much they are even able to, their expenditure, there's definitely a big difference between the expenditure and their revenue. How much is government going to support them? But out of that 125 promises, we decided to now single out our top 6, from the NDC's, manifesto promises. First one is that they are going to extend free SHS to bring in the private schools. They have said that the issue has to do with infrastructure. And so if you are able to bring in the private guys, they also have infrastructure, so they could help in bridging that gap. Another one is train 1 million youths in digital skills. Definitely TVET is going to benefit from this line. And you also have no academic fees for first year public tertiary student. One promise that came in as a shocker. We will be analyzing how government could fund this. The fourth one has to do with dedicate oil revenue, in fact, to the secondary school education, which is free senior high school. We've spoken about the free senior high school not having a dedicated revenue pool. The NDC are saying that they are going to dedicate our oil revenue to fund free SHS. But we all know what is going on in the oil space that even the revenue in the oil sector isn't really stable. It depends on the prevailing market price. And this year, for instance, we've not seen oil revenue approaching fair value. So in years where, oil revenues are not coming in the way we want them to come, what will be the alternative? We would like to hear from the NDC as well, and then those in the studio. Other one has to do with free teaching and learning, vocational training for the youth, and for me, abolishing teacher licensure exams. This is one of the promises that the NDC actually made in their manifesto. They say when they come to power, in fact, they've been given power, they're saying that, look, there will be no licensure exams. Are they going to be happy? One big challenge has to do with finance, and we are looking at the two political parties. Definitely the Green side are in power, but in terms of budget credibility and in terms of increasing the budgetary allocation to the education sector, if you look at MPP and NDC, what can you say about these two political parties? Now, let's look at 2009 to 2016. This was when we were under the NDC administration. They were able to increase their budgetary allocation to education from almost 1.7 billion Ghana cedis to almost 8 billion Ghana cedis just between these 8 years. That's about 346% rise. Look at the MPP, 2017 to 2024. They introduced free SHS. Cost went into it as well, but they increased the budgets from 8.33 billion Ghana cedis to 29.5 billion Ghana cedis. That's about 254%. So you can look at it, you can actually judge, in terms of investing more in education. If you are looking at it on just the face value of the rate of change of the revenue allocation, then definitely you know the numbers, the difference between the two sides. For me, I'm sure one of the data that the NDC actually saw when they were making promise to make level 100 free was possibly this data that was made available by GTech. That if you look at these two curves, the blue one is the admitted students to universities, and the yellow one or the gold one is those who actually go to the universities. Look at the difference, look at the gap, and it's widening. For instance, in 2020 and 2021 academic year, close to about 118,000 students were given admissions to public universities. Only 74,000 were able to honor that. That tells you that, that's 2020-2021 academic year. That tells you that you have a significant component or a significant number of the students who were actually given admission not being able to go. And if you sample them, the first thing they'll talk about probably is finance and funding.
And this is a backlog of a lot of students that were able to gain free SHS.
Exactly.
Yet unable to.
Exactly.
Continue.
When they're done with the free SHS, they want to further. And if they're furthering, they will need finances. And I'm sure that's the reason why the NDC decided to do the free level 100. Also, we've been looking at GETFund. Why is GETFund important? This is a revenue pool that is supposed to help our educational sector, but over the years we've seen how that revenue pool has been collateralized to bring in some loans and has been capped. And NDC in their manifesto spoke a lot about the GETFund and saying that you have to take the cap from the GETFund and make the revenues available to the education ministry or to the schools to use. Why is this important? If you look at all the revenue sources for education, GETFund is one pool that brings in a lot, and we decided to look at
the percentage for GETFund when you're paying tax.
It's about 2.5. Yes, on VAT, and almost everything we consume in this country, GETFund levy is deducted. That means if you GETFund, COVID-19 levy, NHIL, in fact, they make VAT, and so that tells you that it's a big source.
So we collect it, but GETFund generally has been collateralized.
It's been collateralized.
So though we're collecting it, it's not for us.
Unfortunately. If you look at the debts that were restructured, the domestic debt exchange program, GETFund was one of them, ESLA was one of them, and in fact, other revenue sources or special purpose revenue vehicles were all collateralized. This is why it's important. If you look at it from 2024 to 2027, possibly before Mahama ends his tenure, you could see that GETFund will be bringing in huge sums of money. And the educational sector will need this money. That's why you need to take the cap out of it. We did some small analysis on how much it could cost the NDC administration to run the free level 100 education. Simply put, if you decide to use about 125,000 students, just looking at the graph that we saw, that tells you that if you look at a per head cost of 2,000 cedis, then they could be spending about 250 million Ghana cedis. If you compare this to the free SHS, which requires about $2.5 billion cedis, the difference is huge. So it is relatively cheaper to roll out the free level 100, possibly than the free SHS. I mean,
right.
Definitely budgetary allocation to the education sector. We break this down to basic school, and you can see how much we've been allocating to the basic school. It's been on the rise since 2022. It's been getting some funding, and same for secondary education, definitely because of free SHS. But if you look at this line, you could see this was supposed to go this way, but decided to come down. Why? Because there's a little bit of slowdown in the rate of change. And so, I mean, definitely funding is the main challenge, both at the early stage, secondary, and tertiary. So we wait to see how the NDC will honor their 125 promises or campaign promise that they made to our educational sector.
Super. Thank you so much, Kofi. Now, to get into the nuances of what Kofi has just brought to us is Divine Pe, who is an education specialist. He joins us in studio. I also have Irene Sam, and she's the Deputy Public Relations Officer for the PTA Association, also joins me in studio. And also, we're joined by Peter Nti, who joined us via Zoom as well. Dr. Peter Nti is a director for the Institute of Education Studies. And also I've got Reverend Father Stephen Owusu-Secher, President of the Conference of, I've got Reverend Father also joining us a little later. I'll also be joined by King Isel, Speaker for the private schools, would also be also joined by him. But let me introduce Reverend Father properly. Reverend Father Stephen Owusu would be joining us, and is the head of Assistant Secondary. He's the conference head of Assistant Secondary Schools. Charles, you'll be joining us. But before we start that, we've got a 5-minute video for you. Just watch. We'll be back.
The point is this. We have to now learn to add value to Ghana's natural resources. And education should be directed that way. Let me repeat what I said. This business of copying from the textbook onto the chalkboard, back into exercise books, and students memorizing them to reproduce them for examination, those days are gone. It's useless. It doesn't make any difference to Ghana. We've been doing this since 1957. I was 10 years old when we started this kind of examinations where we copy things back by heart, what we call the chew, pour, pass, forget, and be poor type mentality. So now the focus is this. We have over 200 districts in this country. Every district is endowed in a certain way. We have natural endowments in this country, from Accra all the way to the north. What we have to do is begin to identify our national and natural inputs and develop science to add value to these things. Now, when we do hands-on type activities, there's no need to cheat. For example, if you work on projects, and we have projects as a form of assessment, direct their attention that way, where we are not just memorizing information for you. But let me give you a classic example. Let's say, for example, that you are in the northern Ghana. I do training all the way from Accra to northern Ghana. And you have young people who are involved in cotton production and processing cotton into textiles, and then processing textiles into, let's say, fabrics. And you examine young people on these things. There's no reason to cheat because we are doing things, and it's concrete. But where we look at abstractions, like name 3 functions of something, what are the 3 advantages of something, what are the 3 disadvantages of something, all these abstract and they are useless. That's why young people tend to memorize things, to produce it to you exactly the way you want. But these are not critical thinking skills. But the ideal, and why I should pay attention to this, the ideal is how do we begin to now retrain teachers, to retrain young people to learn to do things and develop skills with their hands. And the other example I'll use is that if you look at, let's say, schools in the districts along the riverbanks, we are always talking about the largest man-made lake in Ghana is the Volta Lake. Do we do fish farming, for example, on the riverbanks? These are the science projects that we should do. Because if you look at a country like Norway, sometimes we go to borrow money from them. How do they make their money? From the fishing industries. You know, but here we have people who sit behind desks in lower primary. They sit behind desks in upper primary. They sit behind desks in JHS, senior high school, all the way to universities, just copying and memorizing things. And WIAC enforces that by the nature of the examination that they do. It's time to now begin to be critical thinkers and put on our thinking caps and realize that this thing doesn't work for us. The more we produce graduates in this country, the poorer we get. I mean, we are still underdeveloped. Now, the countries that started with us, who were as underdeveloped about 1957, Taiwan, South Korea, Malaysia, Singapore, Bangkok, go and see them now. Everybody is drifting away from this memorization business and developing skills that add value to the nation's inputs. These are the things that we should begin to look at. And if WIAC takes that attitude, then realize that we don't need examination that fail people. The important thing is that we use WIAC as a punitive assessment. A punitive assessment means that after JHS 3, you are not passing to go into senior secondary school. Now you're on your own. If after senior secondary school, we do the same kind of assessment and you don't pass, now you're on your own, you are not going to the university. But we have to now make sure that every child or every young person in this country passes. Not all people want to be copying things and producing them for exams. Not, a lot of people are not that way inclined. There are all kinds of learners, and there are learners who want to learn by doing things with their hands. That is the sophistication that WIAC needs now. And if you don't change, and I keep saying that we are at that inflection point where it's really silly to continue doing the same things and expect to get a different result. That is the trap that WIAC is in. And they have to think about it. When young people fail, we have to begin to understand how did they fail and why did they fail. Invariably, it's what we are teaching them and the way that we are teaching them and the environment in which we are teaching them. And as a result, they become the victims of our own inefficiencies. And we blame young people for these things. You know, take a kid who has failed in a particular district, remove him and put him in another district where this person is working with their hands and he's going to pass. So what does that tell you? We are born naturally gifted as human beings. That's how God made us. But poor countries have a tendency to fail the bulk of its population. And in Ghana in the year 2015, we should know these things by now.
Well, all set to have that conversation. And I'm going to be starting with Irene, because you're mainly the receivers of the education service that Ghana, if anything has to do with education, we're providing it for the kids. And maybe permit me to use the word kids, but parents seem to receive the service directly. So far, what's your assessments, and have you had any challenges in the kinds of policies that we have implemented so far, the ones we have promised that we're going to be implementing at all? Any challenges and some of the positive gains you'd also want to applaud?
Thank you very much. So, as you rightly said, we are the direct beneficiaries of any governmental policy that is being rolled out. And looking at the FQ and then that of the free senior high school policy has been really rolled out for some years now. And we have also envisaged, or we have seen some of the challenges that has come along with it. First of all, looking at the basic education, we have seen that there has been a neglect of basic education for some time now. Every policy comes to free senior high school, policy, secondary education. So we are looking at the basic education where there is a neglect. Looking at capitation grant that is not forthgoing. The school feeding program is also some way. You know, other facilities like infrastructure. You know, the classrooms are overstressed, teachers are overstressed, no teaching and learning materials, no textbooks to use to teach our words in the various schools. And then looking at furniture has also, seen some kind of deficit in that angle. Then we come to the free senior high school policy, which has been overhyped over the years. Now, this is a policy that is of a good nature if only it was implemented steadily. Or implemented very well, or let's say the notion behind the free senior high school policy was about quality. if the notion was about quality, I think that we will not be where we are now, because all that we have seen is that it has really promoted access, good, equity, good, but the quality aspect of it, we have not seen it. Look at how our wards are suffering during dormitories. Some of them have to even sleep on the bare floor. Some people don't have the floor to sleep even on. And then we look at the dining halls are overstressed. Teaching and learning materials are not there. Teachers too have to teach, be in school for a whole year, no break. Because some of them are teaching first years and second years, third years, concurrently, just like that. So no break for teachers as well. So they become tired and can't even teach our wards very well. So that quality aspect have been compromised. Then we look at feeding. Feeding deficits started gradually. When we went around some of the schools, we saw that when they are being fed with breakfast, they have only a porridge, a mug of porridge. Even there was no salt in the porridge to that extent. No sugar, nothing. Then they are being made to feed on that. You look at the lunch too, they give them some rice, and then the sauce or whatever that they have to accompany with it is woefully very bad. And that was what we started looking at it. And we saw that there was a huge challenge coming from the feeding deficit as well that our wards are experiencing. And then look at examination, both internally and externally. Government has also absorbed that as well. So we see that examination was not forthcoming. So when it's time for examination, the heads of school will call PTA. We need money for examination. Government has not given us any money for examination. Then we have to step in and conduct examination. Then the external ones to government will pay because it's not the free senior high school policy. So both basic and then WAEC or WASI, government says I'll pay. Now our results are being withheld now because of deficits that comes along with it. So all these are challenges that we have seen with the policy, and we are looking forward for it to be reviewed.
Okay.
Let's look at the challenges. Where can we fix? What can we do? And we are major stakeholders in education.
Perfect.
You cannot do away with us.
I will come back to you again, and my question when I come back to you will be that as parents, did we anticipate some of the challenges? Because then generally anything in its very large form wouldn't come without some of these challenges, especially in terms of quality. But Divine, I love talking to you when it comes to education because you've done so much and a lot of research into education. So let's take it from the very basic level. For years, you have outlined so many of the challenges that the basic level suffers, even before we go to the secondary school level. The basic level challenges that my colleague just outlined currently, would you say that they existed years ago, or this is just very new to us?
All right, thank you, Emifa. Thanks for having me, and good afternoon to your viewers. Before I come to your question, it is important to first of all, I mentioned that having had a regime change, we are having a new administration. First of all, it's very important for me for the incoming administration. So I know they have a lot on their plate. We're talking about 125 promises in the education sector that they have made. They want to be in haste to start implementing and want to fulfill. But for me, they have to take it gradual. First of all, they have to understand some of the reforms that are ongoing already in the space so that we find a way to see how their promises can be situated in some of these promises. And the reason being that otherwise we may see some of these reforms that are being forfeited in an attempt to fulfill these promises that have made. I must admit that in the past years we have seen some significant reforms in the education space, right from the basic all through to the secondary school and even the tertiary space. We can talk of the curriculum reform that has happened at the basic level and secondary school also. They started this academic year. It is important that the incoming administration takes time to understand, what they can do to also support this particular reform, because it is something brilliant that we have done. Per international standard, we're supposed to take a look at our curriculum every 5 years. But the basic one, it has been over 11 years that we have not even taken a look. And in 2019, we decided to take a look, which is a plus to us. So the incoming administration will have to look at how can they support that particular reform. There's an ongoing teacher education reform, because at the center of every education system is the teacher. It is the quality of the teacher and the motivation of the teacher. So we are seeing reform at the colleges of education level to ensure that teachers are well developed, to ensure that they are fit for purpose in the 21st century classroom. And the same thing for the in-service teachers. So while reforms are going on at the pre-service level, in-service level also, we are seeing reforms over there. Very important for the incoming administration to also understand how they can support this reform. TVET has seen reform as well as STEM education. Again, the incoming administration will also have to pay attention to some of this. So for me, that's a word of advice before I come back to your question that, yes, you may want to implement your 125 promises because of time constraint, that's 4 years. But it's very important that you engage stakeholders. And that's why I'm happy that as part of the 120 days promises, stakeholder engagement for the education sector is something that has been outlined. At that point, it is very critical that we come to consensus on some of the critical things that needed to be given attention, some of the things that are ongoing that needed to be given attention to, and how the NDC's 125 promises can be situated so that they can be implementing the AES while strengthening some of the reforms that we have seen. All right, back to the basic education level, that is the meat of your question. Yes, over the years, the basic education, where I cited, I noticed that it has received little attention over the years, but we have seen a significant reform in the space for me, and that has been a curriculum change.
Okay.
If nothing at all, for me.
At least the curriculum change at the basic level after 11 years.
Yes, it's something that we can plot ourselves over because it was very, very important for us to do that. If you look at the then curriculum, it was outdated, and we needed to update it to catch up with the contemporary issues.
But what's the need for a new curriculum when we still have about 1 million of them dropping out of school? Who's going to be studying that curriculum?
In education reform, you don't treat the issues in isolation. It's very important that you treat the access aspect alongside the quality aspect. So the curriculum reform actually falls part of the quality aspect. Yes, the 1 million out of school children is an issue of access. So it is something that we equally have to address. So that has not negated the fact that we need to look at the quality aspect by reviewing our curriculum and strengthening teacher capacity to ensure that they deliver effectively. Yes, there are over 1 million out of school children in the country. We're talking about 1.4. Specifically, if you look at the Ghana Statistical Service. And largely, if you look at the data, it is much more concentrated in the northern part of the country. And if you look at the situation over there, mainly because of access to classroom blocks, that has been a challenge. Some of the students up north can even walk more than 5 kilometers just to access school. And when you have a situation like that, then obviously, you are going to see students not being in a school. And then we're talking about some of them that have not even been in school before, about 1 million that have not even been in classroom before. And basically also we have not strengthened early age enrollment. So we still have a long way to ensure that early age enrollment is something that we continue to have. That's why I'm glad about the aspect of the NDC manifesto that actually mentioned that we'll be placing emphasis on early childhood education. If you're able to enroll them at a very prime age, the tendency of them or remain in school becomes very high, because if a child outgrows the class age, it means that the child is at risk of dropping out. So late enrollment has also contributed to our out-of-school situation. Access to classroom block has also contributed to the situation. And for a very fact that some students are performing poorly, they feel that classroom environment is not for them. And that is why we need to pay attention to interventions such as differentiated learning that actually look at teaching students not at their class level, but at their performance level. Because when you are teaching students as a whole class, you will see that those that are not performing continue to be at risk of dropping out because they feel like, no, we are not catching up. But when you teach it as a differentiated approach, where those that are performing well, they are together, those that are not performing well, they are also together, you give them a specialized intervention to catch up with their colleagues. It helps them also to remain in school. Yes, there are ongoing interventions, but very importantly, we need to improve access to classroom bulk in the northern part of the country.
I'll come to some of the interventions you can recommend, especially for the basic level education. But right now, though, let's go on Zoom and talk to Reverend Father Stephen Owusu-Setra. He's the president for Conference of Heads of Assisted Secondary Schools. You know them as CHAS. Rev, thank you for joining us. And so for you at CHAS, tell me, are you able to share some positive gains at all out of the many policies that have been rolled out over the years, at least in the last 8 years, and then what you're looking forward to see this current administration implement?
Thank you very much. Please, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me on your program this afternoon. Yes, we members of CHAS, we have a lot to say about the policy for the last 8 years, that is the free SHS. And some of us have been in the position to witness the policy before the free SHS, where students were asked to pay school fees, and then we would take care of them, and through the 3 years of their secondary education, and also had the benefit of going through the free SHS policy. Yes, we are of the view that the free SHS came in to help students who literally did not have what it took for them to go through secondary education. Some of them fell out when they completed junior high school, and they were forced to, some of them were forced to go to the streets, others were forced to go to the apprenticeship to learn some kind of trade and other things. And when free SHS came, you realize that those who had completed junior high school and couldn't get access to senior high school, all of them, in fact, most of them, I cannot say all of them, most of them now went back to basic school to register and then took part of the BEC. And you realize that the second year of the free SHS, the numbers now ballooned. And there had a lot of people, students coming in. And I think the 2017, for the first time, we were able to enroll over 400,000 students into the system. And that brought in the deficit of facilities. And then we move on to how we were going to accommodate all these students into our schools, especially in the boarding schools and the day schools. Even though the former regime at that time, put up or constructed E-blocks. In fact, some of them could not even accommodate some of the students, and pushing them to those schools became a problem. So we had to do single track. Now, we have gone through it. Students who couldn't have access to senior high school education got access. Some came with nothing. At times, some heads had to look for sponge and soap and other things for some of them. We helped them to complete school. For the first 4 years, I can say the free SHS policy was a bit smooth for us. But after 2020, 2021 up to date, things became a bit difficult for heads of school. And we have gone through, in fact, we can say that the free senior high school policy is where it is now because of our relentless effort to make sure that we sustain it. In fact, we have done our best. And some of the challenges, I can say, are very, I don't know how to describe them, very, very, in fact, there are many challenges that we've gone through. We feel that when we are, we have to sit around the table and discuss, because we are the frontliners. We have been implementing the policy.
Rev, out of these many challenges that you have said, there's a new government and they have proposed many policies, and they said they're even going to be reviewing the free SHS policy, not to scrap it entirely, but they'll review it. In their attempt to want to review it, what are you looking forward to that will be put in the review that could make it any better for heads of schools?
Yes, I wanted to mention some of the challenges before we move on to how we want them to be resolved.
That's fair.
In fact, you realize that if SHS came and all the fees were absorbed, initially we were thinking that the students will come to school, the examination, for example, if you are going to write a WASI examination, the parents will pay. Later on, the government took it up, and when it was time for them to pay, the monies were not forthcoming as we wished. Examinations will start, and the monies will not be released to us, and all that. We call something practical fee. Practical fee normally was paid by the student. Apart from the fee that WAEC will charge, we also charge practical fee. That's what we use to buy the consumables and other equipment for the visualers, the home economics, physics, practical, chemistry, and the rest. In fact, we feel that the policymakers did not really understand that part of the examination. So it became very tough when the monies were released to us. The food. Remember in our conferences, when we bring out our communique, we have been stating that we need the money. The money should be sent to us, the heads, to buy our own food. We want to buy our own food to feed, because we cannot sit in our school.
Why? What would be the difference?
Because.
Oh, did I lose Rev? Okay, if I'm able to connect to Rev, we'll pick up on that conversation. But let me go to...
Hello, please, can you hear me?
Oh, yes, perfect. I want to know... Yes, I want to know the difference if the heads or if the schools are able to purchase their own food as of taking it from the buffer stock.
Because you cannot, as a head, you can't sit in school and you don't know who is bringing the food, because you don't know the supplier. The supplier is known by buffer stock, and then they have to bring the food. So if the food is not coming, you don't know who to call. You call buffer stock, they will tell you the food is coming, and you don't know when it is coming. A rice could take about maybe 2 weeks before it reaches the schools. So we are of the view that we should go back to what we were doing. The money should be given to the heads, and then we can buy our own food. That one, we have been reiterating it over and over again, because if the food is not coming, you can't feed your students. So if you have Gari only in stock, you have to only feed the students with Gari, because that's what you have. All right, but the food is on its way coming. You need all the food items. You need about 18 food items for you to keep in your stores, so that you can feed the student with balanced diet. So if you miss 2 or 3 or 4 of them, and you have to feed them, it becomes very difficult for you to feed the students. And that is why at times people complain that, oh, we went to this school and they are eating this morning, evening, morning, afternoon, evening. Yes, because the food is on its way. It has not reached the school, and the headmaster doesn't have any means to go buy the food, and feed the students. So that is why, with many other challenges, that is why we are saying that in anything at all, the money should be given to us to buy our own food. Again, we are also saying that there should be a source of funding, a typical source of funding for the free SHS. Because apart from this food that we receive to feed the students, we are also giving what we call perishables. That's the money we use to buy perishables, to add up to the food item that we cook for the students. That money too, at times delays for about 2 months, at times about a month, at times 3 months before the money comes to you. You have to buy on credit and all that. So we are saying that money should also come to us on time. If it comes to us on time, then we'll be able to get the money to go to the market and feed the students. If you don't do that, then you a lot of pressure on the heads, and parents don't know what to do. Students are reporting us to their parents, and it is not our fault. You see, we are under the mercy of those who are supposed to bring. We are supposed to bring that money and the food to us.
Right.
If the food money is not coming, then we cannot be in a better position to feed the students well.
Okay, I'm sure that as I go around the table, I'll come to you again so that you can now tell me some of the things you're expecting the current administration to implement to at least cushion you out of some of these challenges that you have outlined. And there are also some beliefs that most of the heads were not allowed to speak up to share their challenges. It's either you're hearing the challenge from the PTA or maybe a bold president like you who is able to speak up out of the challenges. That's not true. Okay. Okay, thanks for clarifying. But I'll come back to you for recommendations. But let me quickly go to Dr. Peter Anti and then ask him, you have been through the regimes and then even now you have seen what the current administration wants to do. I'm focusing majorly on the feeding grant for you. And I'm also focusing majorly on the new curriculum. Divine has spoken extensively about it and the challenges with WIAC. All this put together.
We always try. We always try to explain things to parents. We try to explain things to the media. We speak up to management of GES and we speak to the Ministry of Education. And we are on in this process have never shown that we cannot talk. You see, we as CHAS, we have our the secretary and the president supposed to, articulate what we go through to the media. And so if you go to a school and the head says that, please,
I'm unable to talk. You are the right medium. I'm glad you have made this clear. Thank you.
Not that we are afraid. We're not afraid of anybody.
Of course not. Let me go back to Doc. So Dr. Peter Anti, who is on Zoom as well, I'd want you to know that most of the promises and the policies that the current government is proposing that they're going to be implementing, the reviews, the new ones, even as well the tertiary level, absorbing their first year level education. Should we be worried?
Yeah, thank you very much, and good afternoon to your listeners and viewers. I think that we should not be worried. My focus will be on the one who will be in charge of implementing all these ideas that have been put together by the government in waiting. And I say this because that individual would have to understand where we have come from and where we are heading towards. So when I talk about where we have come from, I'm looking at the strategic plan of education that was put in place around 2018, and that's supposed to end around 2030. If you look at the two manifestos, okay, now we are looking at the NDC manifesto. If you look at the NDC manifesto, you will see that most of the things that they are seeking to do are things that are geared towards achieving the strategic plan. And that is why, for the first time, both the NDC and the NPP manifestos were similar in terms of what they wanted to do. If you go through it, you see that most of the things, they were all talking about the same thing at the early grade level, at the primary level, at the GHS level, at the senior high school level, and at the tertiary level. You see a lot of similarities that we are seeking to implement.
Oh, I'm not sure if the network is favoring me with Doc's line, but hi, Doc, can you hear me? Okay. Unfortunately, I cannot hear Doc, but if we're able to reconnect with him, we shall pick up the conversation with him. If I still have Justice King ASL on there, you speak for the private schools. If you can hear me. Hello, King ASL. Kindly unmute, and if you can hear me, I know that the private schools at the secondary level have complained majorly, especially when it comes to school placements, that the public schools are prioritized before they are also giving admissions. And what do you make of that, first of all? And secondly, in answering that question, the current administration has mentioned
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Is that Doc or King? Okay, Doc, please go on. I can hear you now. Hello, Doc. All right, let me come back into the studio and I'll come to you, Irene. You heard Chaz.
I heard him.
You heard Chaz. Do you share similar challenges?
Yes.
You hear Chaz, and you hear that you share with their challenges as well.
Hello.
How did you come in to mitigate some of these challenges?
Right. Well, now what we have done
Hello,
over
can you
the
hear me?
years.
Doc, yes, I can hear you. I was holding the fort in the studio for you, but if you can hear me, please land on your point.
Yes, so I'm saying that anybody who will be in charge of the education sector and would have to implement these ideas that have been put together by the ministry, by the NDC, would need to hasten slowly, understand where we have come from, so that they don't make some of the mistakes that have already been made in the system.
And so for you, it's not even the policies at all. It is about the implementation and who leads this implementation.
Yes, exactly. For me, that is what is important, because the person needs to understand where we are going. I listened to Divine, and he made mention of some of the things that we are doing already in the system. If you look at the strategic plan, there are 3 areas that we focus on. We focus on learning outcomes, and then we are supposed to focus on educating delivery efficiency. And then the third thing was to focus on priorities. Now, all the things that we are doing in terms of reforms, curriculum reforms, teacher education reforms, unfortunately, we do not have an infrastructure reform, which I think the administration.
I'm not lucky with the network today. Yeah, I'm back into the studio. And so for Chaz, I'm wondering, parents, what are some of the things you did to mitigate the challenges? Because students had to write the exams anyway, and they had to eat anyway. I'm sure the children that are the locally acquired title that we say, the dada birds will be calling, Mommy, they're giving us only Gary. What are some of the things that you did?
So what we have done was that we tried to reach out to GS management so that we can have a one-on-one discussion engagement and see where government can no longer provide genuinely. You see, and it shouldn't be that government pushback will be that, okay, because I cannot do this, I have failed. That is not it. We are not looking at that angle, but genuinely looking at the coffers, our economy. Can we really keep on providing feeding for our wards? Look at the increasing numbers that we have. The whole Ghana free senior high school policy, and then looking at the challenges that's coming with it. So we wanted to meet with them and see where we can meet them, even if it's halfway, because we appreciate the fact that government, budget on education is quite huge, and then taking care of uniforms, examination, utilities, and then feeding coming along with it was so huge. So we made several calls to meet with them, so that we can see the way forward.
Are they willing?
They were not willing. They saw us as a pressure group, rather. We that are direct beneficiaries, our wards will call on us. The food is not good. You can't eat the food. You have to send your ward money every week, beefing up provisions here and there. They have to even fall on the cafeteria or canteens in the various schools just to eat. And all these things were coming to us. So we're seeing that this is a challenge. We are direct beneficiaries. What can we do?
Do you support the call from Charles that at least the money for feeding, at least out of the many challenges, the money for feeding at least should be given to the school so that they can purchase their own food? You agree to that?
That is if the money is there. If the money is there. Because we know that really, we don't even know where the funding is coming from. Whether we have a reliable source of funding for free senior high school policy.
At least the current government has said that they're going to be rolling out a pool that will be permanently for education.
What we had in the system, it didn't look as if we had a genuine funding for the policy.
An intentional funding.
Because if the funding was there, where from the deficits?
That's Divine. I'll come to you, Justice King Isel, a little later, but let me just stay with my guest in the studio here. Divine, so tell me, this current administration says that they're going to be absorbing first year of education. If you look at the numbers of secondary school graduates who are hanging, are we also not about to call upon ourselves another policy that will say that it's not quality? Because then what happened? If a person is not able to afford the first year, what's the guarantee that they can afford the second and the third year? Are we about to train just first years and then now put our hands and be thinking what's going to happen for the second and third?
All right.
I just want the feasibility of some of their flagship programs that they've been proposing.
All right. Thank you. For me, I always say whatever political parties want to do, they can do it, but just that there will be an opportunity cost free SHS has been done. Despite the challenges, we see it has been done in the last 7 years, but there has been opportunity cost in a way that some subsectors would have to pay for it, the way that money will have to. So it has been done, but there's an opportunity. If the NDC says they want to do free first year's tertiary, they can do it. But surely there will be an opportunity cost, especially when we are debt burdened like this, talking about debt to GDP ratio of around 76%. The only way out, so that we do not incur the issue of opportunity cost, some subsectors paying for some of this, is to ensure that we find a way of increasing revenue at the education sector. And for me, that should be the preoccupation of the NDC, because whatever they want to do, finally, is going to depend on funding. So there's a need for them to look at some innovative ways of raking in revenue to support whatever idea that they want to do. Some of them could include, for instance, if we call something debt to education swap. Now that you are debt burden, debt to education swap simply is about, okay, you talk to your creditors. Creditors, you negotiate through the Global Partnership for Education, and then you come to a conclusion that, okay, if you're able to forfeit me this percentage of the debt, I will increase funding in education by this. It's a new strategy that other countries are adopting so that your debt burden is lessened. But what you have to do for it is to ensure that you have increased funding for education. But that way you lessen your burden, but you have also increased funding for education. Another approach is what they call the loan buy down, where you, in this case, the creditor will say, well, I'm forfeiting all your debt, but you have to attain some target in your education sector.
Right.
So I'll forfeit your debt, but attain some target. At maybe 87% of your students should be able to meet the minimum proficiency at the reading and literacy level. So it is something that other countries are exploring when they are debt burdened. So for me, it's one approach that I'll say the NDC should explore. But again, the NDC must also be interested in looking at the local government level, the MMDH, to see how they capacitate them to rake in more revenue. Because if you look at the Pre-Tertiary Education Act, it devolved the responsibility of infrastructure provision to the MMDHs. But they don't have the capacity because of financial constraint. If you're able to look at how you capacitate them to look at alternative way of raking in revenue. In fact, at EduWatch, when I was at EduWatch, one of the things that we were assisting MMDAs to do was to look at how they have an innovative way to rake in more revenue. Right. In fact, the blueprint is with EduWatch. NDC can just fall on EduWatch and so that, by that way, they can rake in more revenue. And if they are able to do that and have a policy to commit at least 10 to 20% of that revenue to education, it can support some of the issues that are of a burden to them. And again, the free SHS. Of course, one thing that a consensus that all of us has reached is that in its current state, it is not financially sustainable, because I told you that there's an opportunity cost for us to even reach at where we are. And even if you look at the budget credibility, it is not encouraging. If you look at the past 7 years, the budget credibility is around 78%. So there's a way that at the end of the stakeholder consultation that the NDC wants to have, we have to come to a conclusion that there's a need for at least some level of cost sharing on this. Look, if you look at the 2023 or even the 2024 free SHS fees absorbed by the government, I feel that there are petty things that if we have genuine engagement with stakeholders, parents we may be able to make. For instance,
as Irene has been reiterating here.
First aid, 1 cedi. I'm not sure a parent will say I won't pay 1 cedi. Culture fee, 1 cedi. Postage, 1 cedi 50 pesos. Sanitation fee, 1 cedi 50 pesos. If you have this small one and you have
it will lessen the burden.
It will lessen the burden. So I believe that stakeholder engagement will have to come to that. But lastly, on the still financing, I think what the NDC should also be interested in doing is to look at a reform, a legislative reform, especially when it comes to the GET fund. Now, I have looked at...
Let's forget fun. I'm coming.
Okay, all right.
Coming. Let me go to Justice. Justice, you've joined us via Zoom, and Justice speaks for the private school. And earlier when I lost you, the question and the clarity I want is that there's the issue of the public schools being prioritized a lot more over the private schools, especially when it comes to school placement. That's one. And two, the incoming administration says that it's going to extend the free SHS to the private schools. I know that one of the things or one of the mentality of us here in Ghana is that when your child attends a private school, it is because it is in a better position to provide better education or quality education than if your child is in a public school. So extending the free SHS to the private schools, is it an idea or is it a policy that the private schools are welcoming wholeheartedly? And how, looking forward, do you want the incoming government to look at the prioritization of public schools over the private schools?
Thank you very much, MFA. We have always looked forward to this opportunity, and we knew that whatever the case be, government will review the policy to involve private schools. Our focus has always been on the private child who either will not be able to go to school, and now through free SHS they are able to go to school. So we welcome the idea. But this is the thing: private sector schools have always modeled their business on a certain cutoff point in the past. And so in the past, if you didn't get a certain aggregate, let's say 30 or better, you are not placed in the public secondary school. And that was the kind of customer base that some of the private schools, secondary schools base their intake on. With the coming into force of free SHS, everybody was allowed to go to school except for those who got 9 in either English or mathematics. And so ab initio, there was nobody to take into private SHS to begin with. And so the thinking then was that why don't we then, in placing the children or in making the selection process, why don't we include private science school so as an option for students who want to do private science school? And even though our people were prepared even to take in whatever government will give for their to be able to maintain their schools. For example, if you know how much it costs to train one child in the public sector, we should do the same to the private sector so that they can be able to keep on running their schools because the facilities are there, not being used and all that. But our conversation did not go down too well. The fear was that it might not help the FSHS the way they wanted to implement it. And so many schools, private sector schools, secondary schools went down. To be honest with you, a lot went down. And so it's a welcome idea that this time around we want to include private sector schools and get them involved in the FSHS. How are we going to go about it is the next thing to talk about. I think we have to get back to the table and see what will be the best way of going about it. Between now, when we have our next intake, which will be somewhere in September, we should be able to
that's some time.
Be able to resolve that.
That's some good time. Well, back in the studio here, the private schools, parents who belong to the private school, are they excited about the fact that the incoming administration says that it's going to be migrating the free SHS to the private schools? Why? Because I ask this question because many parents who are dissatisfied with the way the quality of service is in the public schools want to just migrate their children to the private level. And so with extending it and the symptoms and the challenges that you have seen, are parents excited about this decision?
Yes, I must say yes. But before I go to that, I just want to make a little contribution to what Divine said. The aspect that government is committed to currently is the PTAs who have absorbed all those aspects.
Wow.
Like the examination fee, the first aid, the culture, everything falls on the PTAs.
All of these, the government promised to want to deliver, but currently it's the PTAs that
have absorbed them. Even the practicals that we mentioned, just the last ended WASI. Parents, we have to buy everything for ours to conduct practicals.
Interesting.
And we have been doing that for several years now. Look at uniform. When they enroll the first year, they don't go naked, my dear. We buy uniform for them. So why do you want to take uniform as a free policy? Parents can really, really provide uniform from their wards. And having gone through this policy, having engagement with parents, no politician should think that parents are unable to take care of their wards. We can.
But they have the numbers indicating that since they're free.
But yes, you want to cushion us a little. But the areas that you cannot allow us to come in and help the process to work.
Okay.
So coming to the private schools, yes, you know, most parents these days, from the basic schools, their wards are in the private schools because they see that is where the quality is. The quality is not with the public, but it's the private. So and then the private school child is also a Ghanaian child that must also benefit from any policy that concerns education. They must not be left out because they are private schools. And we, as an association, we are private schools as part of us. So we are also in engagement with them. So having heard this from the NDC, it's a good policy that must also come to them. And then looking at the challenges, because it's the private school sector, I know that the parents there will be willing to help. So globally, or looking at the policy extensively, the review should come up that way.
Okay.
That this little aspect that parents can confidently or comfortably provide, we should be giving that mandate to do. Then whatever government wants to cushion us a little bit, we're ready for it. So let us have that stakeholder engagement and see where we can make it. Because we want the policy to work.
It looks like there's a consensus of stakeholder engagement. And Divine, you're going to be there. I'm going to be outroing the show with you. So let me go back to Charles and then ask him. At least you've mentioned one of the requirements that you want the government to do. At least give you the money to buy the food. I want another one key change you're hoping to see in this incoming administration in terms of education policy.
Thank you very much. Please, can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. One, apart from the food and the money issue that I spoke about, I want what we just want the government to do is to make sure that they expand the existing facilities in all the schools before they move on to put up new schools.
Okay.
Because the thing is that if you have traditional schools that have, they are top notch and they have gotten their names, build on their name and all that, their good reputation, and you don't really try to expand the facilities, and then you build up new schools and those ones are going rotten, then you are not doing any good thing to the schools in the country. So we are saying that maybe you have one school somewhere at the hinterland, then the school doesn't even have assembly hall. It doesn't have any science lab. It doesn't have even school field where students could even go and exercise and play around and all that. And then you go and put out a new one, and then you leave that one. Then you post students to those schools that you have left alone, and students say, "Oh, we will not go to that school." Then that school is just you are rendering that school dysfunctional.
Right.
So we are saying that. Or you go put up new schools. Remember during President Kufuor's time, he chose some schools, expanded it, and called them science resource schools. We want the government to expand the facilities.
Okay.
Yes, okay. Expand them and give to each school what the school really deserves to call it a school.
Okay.
So that nobody will say that, oh, if you post a student to this school, say, I don't want to go to that school, I want to go to Opoku school, I want to go to Prempeh College, I want to go to Presec. And if you don't take me to Presec, I'm not going to that school.
Right.
But you see, you cannot put every student to Presec or Opoku school. Let's expand all the schools, the facilities, make them, good schools. They have everything so that students will not complain.
Right.
The other one I think we want to talk about is that we don't know, the government has really, the incoming one has really stated so many things that they want to do for education. We are waiting. We know very well that there's going to be a stakeholder engagement. They're going to call us around the table and then we discuss. When we are waiting, we are putting our paper together. When we are called, then we will have the chance to
present all of it. Thank you.
All of them in detail.
Thank you, Rev. Thank you. Quickly, let me go to Doc. Doc, so you mentioned that as a person who is going to be leading the charge, a person that's going to be implementing all of these policies. But do you have, on top of your mind, do you have any other thing that you're expecting this current or this incoming administration, forgive me, it will take me some time to get used to it, the incoming administration to do that you'll love to see?
Yeah, I think the first thing is the stakeholder consultation that they want to do. I would wish that they extend the conversation beyond the free senior high school so that there's a broader conversation about the education sector, basic, secondary, and tertiary, so that whatever decision that is taken during that particular forum would be binding on anybody that will lead the ministry for the next 4 years or into the future. I also sincerely want to still reiterate the point that we need to pay attention to our target of education for the year 2030. We should not go or stray away from it. We should be focused because there are certain things that we have started, like the curriculum reforms that I wanted to mention. We are doing teacher reforms and a lot more, and we need to continue with these things so that we'll be able to achieve the targets that we set for ourselves for 2030. So there should be a comprehensive understanding of where the sector is now and where we would want to go. And I think that consultation, that platform would offer a good opportunity for all of us to help to push the education sector forward. And lastly, what I wish could be done is that we need somebody who listens, somebody who does not portray himself as he knows it all, so that we'll be able to share ideas and then collectively, you listen to all the stakeholders you are talking to now. Everybody seems to suggest that there are challenges, but what were we told? We should not complain because it's something that we are doing and this is what we want to do. We don't want that poster again in the sector because whatever happens in the sector, all of us are affected. Our children, our brothers, our sisters are in the education system. So we need somebody who will listen to the stakeholders and do the wish of the people so far as it is appropriate and it will lead to the realization of the goals of education in the country.
Thank you, Doc. Very well said. Finally, Divine. So in your submission, kindly conclude with the Get Fund challenge that you were about. Just remember that it's been collateralized, so there's not much we can do with it. So please conclude with it.
So I think I'm still on a way that the NDC still can rake in revenue. Get Fund, of course, I don't want to talk about its capping yet, but what I have looked also over the years is that I'm seeing a tendency of us channeling good resource of the GET Fund to non-infrastructure projects. Of course, we all know the main object of the GET Fund being set up is to improve infrastructure in our schools. But if we look at the GET Fund formula over the years, especially for the year 2022, you realize that even as much as 70% of the GET Fund proceeds has been allocated to non-infrastructure projects. If you do that, of course, you are left with roughly just 30% of your proceeds for infrastructure projects. There's nothing you can do much about that. That's why you continue to see instances of 1.3 million pupils not having sitting and writing place in our school. So for me, the incoming government will have to look at probably reviewing the GET Fund Act to see how they review the portion to make it that at least 70% of the GET Fund proceeds should go towards infrastructure, because that is the object of the act. But now we are seeing heavy load of non-infrastructure projects onto the GET Fund. It shouldn't be so. So that there should be an amendment for me that in terms of legislative reform should be an amendment to that. And then also in terms of one legislative reform I would like to see is at the end of the Student Loan Act. You know, if you look at the Student Loan Act and you look at the sources of funding for the arts, it lists several sources. The first one is the money paid into the fund representing up to 10% of the inflows into the GET Fund trust fund. So that leeway to say up to. So over the years, we have not even seen in some instances 1% even allocated to GET Fund, because that leeway is that, okay, you have the room from 0% even to 10%. So over the years, we've seen that the formula has not allocated adequate funding to the the Student Loan Trust Fund for them to assist students at the tertiary level. Now that the NDC intends to say after, okay, I'll pay the first year for 1,100 for you, I'll strengthen the GET fund so that you can access more resources. What they need to do is that one of the main sources, which is the GET fund to the Student Loan Trust Fund, so then to ensure that at least that particular act, this particular act is reviewed so that it becomes mandatory that at least 10% of the proceeds from GET fund is allocated, not leave it blank, where that we can even see 0.7% allocated in someone. I think last year, 2023, 0.7% allocated to the fund. But to learn, finally, I think the key word going forward in the next 4 years should be consensus building.
Right.
The incoming administration must be very keen on that. They have to put stakeholder consultation at the heart of whatever they do. I'm sure if we are able to engage stakeholders, and stakeholders should not be seen as ticking off a box. We have consulted, we have taken a decision, but we just want to tick a box, so we have asked you to come and sit down and say, well, we have consulted, but at the end of the day, the input of the people does not reflect in whatever consultation we've done. It should be that you have consulted them and that their input actually means something to you, and then consensus is built among the city. When we are able to do that, I'm sure some of the issues we have a common ground in addressing it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Divine. I'm done with this segment, but quickly for you, just one question. What kind of a leader do you want in the ministry? Somebody who has education background, or somebody who would build a consensus, or somebody who would just listen?
All the three. But you see, right. We want a leader who will leverage on the PTAs to improve infrastructure.
Okay.
Because we have the credits for that.
Okay.
PTAs have built schools, classroom blocks, dining halls, washrooms, libraries, everything, staff bungalows. So they should just leverage on the PTAs. And then we'll just do a lot to complement government efforts.
Right. Super. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today on The Pulse. We'll go for a quick break. We'll be back shortly.